Okay, so Paul here is defending himself. And where is Paul, if anybody remembers? He's in Caesarea doing what? What's going on in Caesarea? He is teaching the Word. Technically, that's a correct answer because he's teaching it through giving a defense. He's on trial right here. And the Jews had plotted to kill Paul because he's a pest, if you will. He's only a pest to them because he's trying to preach Christ's doctrine. And to them now, because of who Paul was, he used to be a Jew, a Pharisee in fact, and now that he's preaching Christ, he's a traitor. And so they hate Paul. They want him dead. And so they plotted to kill him. And when they learned of that plot, they transported him here to Caesarea. And they brought eloquent speakers to try to put some fault on Paul, but they couldn't prove any of the accusations. Paul defends himself. And then, long story short, we're all the way here to verse 24 in chapter 24. And let's begin there. I think I'm on the right chapter. And after certain days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, which was a Jewess, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith of Christ. And as he reasoned of righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come, Felix did what? He didn't convert, but he trembled. Okay? He trembled and answered, "Go thy way, for this time, when I have a convenient season, I will call for thee." That's a very sad answer from anybody. When the truth is being proclaimed, or when the truth is shown to you, or to another, we're doing our part as Christ soldiers, and we are studying with those who are trying to convert souls and win souls for Christ. And so far, the Bible study is good, and they understand the truth. But there's something holding them back, whatever it is. Cognitive dissonance is a dangerous thing. What that is that mentally we build a wall. And so when I had this myself, this barrier had to be broken down before I could be converted to Christ. Because I'm holding on to what I've always thought I knew. I'm holding on to the traditions of my family, or to previous thoughts that I've had in my mind. And it doesn't happen immediately all the time. Well, actually none of the time, I should say. Some expect, hey, here's the truth. Oh, okay, well, let's obey that. That's not going to happen either. It's when we're out evangelizing, and if you want to, and if you meet somebody on that day, the last thing they're probably going to do is open up to you and discuss to you the most important thing that they possess, and that would be their soul. And so we have to open them up a little bit, make them comfortable, or get them to be comfortable with you to where they can open up to you and speak to you and get to where they get to this place. But that's beside the point. But Felix heard the truth from Paul. He reasoned. That's important. He reasoned with Felix. This is the usual way of preaching and teaching that the inspired men did in the first century. They reasoned with the Scriptures. Did Paul have Scriptures to reason with? Yes. What would that be? The scrolls. They had the Old Testament. Yes, they had everything that pointed to Jesus Christ. Everything pointed to Him, that He is in fact the Messiah. And unfortunately, many ignored it. So he reasoned with the Scriptures. He reasoned with truth. He's not trying to sweet talk Felix. He's not trying any gimmick, rather. And he's straightforward. Here's the truth. Here's the gospel. And it's going to appeal to the mind, and it's going to appeal to the heart. Okay? And so Isaiah said this. Let's read some scriptures here. Let's go to Isaiah 1 and 18. Isaiah 1 and 18. And then somebody else will mark Acts 17, 2 and 3. And then someone else, 2 Timothy 2 and 15. So here are the three scriptures: Isaiah 1 and 18, Acts 17, 2 and 3, 2 Timothy 2 and 15.
Come now and let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they should be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they should be as wool.
Yeah. Back then, they had the opportunity, or they have turned their backs on God, and instead of God just obliterating them off the face of the earth, what did God want to do? Come now. He's inviting them to come back to Him. Let us reason together. Okay? Let's reason what I'm teaching and how you're behaving. And then when you reason with me and your heart is in good soil like it should be, this is what's going to happen. Your sins, they're going to be forgiven. Though they're as scarlet, they should be white as snow. They're red like crimson, they shall be as wool. That's the whole purpose. Reasoning with the Scriptures. It's not trying to talk down people. It's not trying to push people away or tell people, hey, we're better than you because we know God's Word, you don't. That's not the point. The point is we want them to know God's Word so that our enemies could become our family. Okay? Could be part of the Lord's army. All right, Acts 17, 2 and 3.
And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and allegedly that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus, who I preach unto you, is Christ.
So there it is, right there. Okay, so he reasoned with them in the synagogues out of the what? Scriptures. That's important. That's important. I'm not up here trying to preach what Brandon Greaves thinks or what I think y'all should do. I'm only here we're trying to study God's Word together and reason with that. All right, so he's alleging with them out of the Scriptures which they had in the synagogue. We just discussed this. They have the scrolls, and so he's trying to open them and allege to them, look, this is the Christ right here. This is the truth. And of course, 2 Timothy 2:15. Who's got that?
Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that thinketh not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
Yeah, rightly dividing the word of truth, not rightly dividing the word of somebody's opinion or somebody's thought or philosophy. Okay? All right, so he reasoned with them, and he reasoned of righteousness. And of course, we've discussed this many times. Righteousness is what? God's commandments. That's the best answer in my opinion. Right living is correct. But we have to be specific about right living. The only way to live right is to live according to God's Word, God's commandments. That's it. That is righteousness. He reasoned with them of righteousness, which is revealed in the gospel. He reasoned with Felix of temperance. What is temperance? That's it. Self-control. We are required to be moderate in things that are right and to totally abstain from things that appear to be evil. Okay? Be moderate with things that are right, which means can some things that are not inherently sin become sinful? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's when we put other things before God, when we put things in a higher priority with Him. God is not only first in our lives, but He is our life, period. That's the way it is. All right, so let's read some scriptures about temperance. 1 Corinthians 9, 25 and 27. 1 Corinthians 9, 25 and 27. Exactly right. I have to be subject. I have to control myself. And there are those who teach and say, you know what, I just can't help it. Well, yes, we can. If we couldn't help it, then God is commanding something that is impossible. And that's not the God we serve. Of course, 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all opinions of evil. Okay, so he reasoned with Felix of righteousness. He reasoned with Felix of temperance. He reasoned with Felix of what else? The judgment to come. Okay? And so that's the thing that many, I would say the majority of this world ignore. The majority of this world ignore the judgment that is to come, or they try to twist it in a way to where they can feel comfortable with the judgment. Okay? So that's what liberalism and modernism do. They just ignore judgment. It's just not pleasant for them to consider. It's not popular with the rest of the world. They assume that, that, hey, the world has been this long. I mean, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing because the judgment doesn't seem like it's coming at all, or I have more time. But what's the problem with that? It's impossible to know, okay? But then again, they'll twist that judgment. Some will accept the fact that, yes, judgment day will come, but how do they make themselves comfortable with that judgment? They twist the scriptures, and what do they teach about that? There's one right there, okay? We're looking for signs that Jesus is coming. And they want to say that that's true for what purpose? Yeah, hey, you see that? I mean, Jesus is coming soon, so I need to stop what I'm doing and get right. That's unfortunate, because Jesus will come as a thief in the night, right? And no good thief would tell us or give us a sign that he or she is coming to our house to rob us that night. It's not going to happen. So there's that. So many misinterpret the scriptures or twist the scriptures to feel comfortable about the judgment. Even if he does come, another group teaches this. 7 years of what? Yeah, 7 years of tribulation, all right? The rapture has come, and then in 7 years, Jesus is going to come again and with his soldiers, and there's going to be a big battle on earth and all of that. And during that 7 years, that's when the people are going to realize, oh, my friends and loved ones have disappeared because they became Christians, and they're all of a sudden going to open this book and study and become right during that time. Can I tell you something that's really embarrassing to me? I believe that. There's that too, but I ignored that fact. I thought, hey, the 7-year thing, that's my second chance. So I can live this kind of life, and then during that, and when that happens, I already know what I've done, and I'll be right there. It's comforting, right? It's unreasonable. It's ridiculous. So that's what the judgment to come is here. Let's read some scriptures on that. Let's go to Romans 14 and read 10 through 12. Romans 14, 10 through 12. And then someone else, 2 Corinthians 5, 10 and 11. 2 Corinthians 5, 10 and 11, and then Hebrews 9 and 27. Romans 14, 10 through 12. And one more.
So that every one of us shall give account of himself to God.
Okay, everyone should give account of himself to God. First off, we can't save each other, right? But every knee's going to bow, every tongue's going to confess. The only problem with that, when that time comes, what's the problem? It's too late. It's too late. There's nothing that they're going to be begging and pleading and all of that, but it's too late. So we have to give an account to ourselves now. Okay, 1 Corinthians 5. Or 2 Corinthians 5.
For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. Knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade men, but we are made manifest unto God, and I trust also are made manifest in your conscience.
There it is. Okay. The terror of the Lord, does this sometimes persuade men to obey the gospel? Is it okay to scare people into obeying the gospel? Not by our words, but showing what God has said and what's coming. I mean, that's really our motive to teach people. Okay? We want to save souls for Christ, and we're serving Him by doing that. And then we want to, before it's everlasting too late, before this day comes, we want to persuade people. And really, there's nothing more scarier than the thought of having a soul lost in eternity. Nothing. Nothing.
You know, sometimes, Brandon, it takes being scared for some people to just realize there's a higher being.
Yes, sir.
Because, you know, you realize that when years past 9/11, it got a lot of people's attention.
It did.
And then now, you know, they've sort of faded away. But sometimes, like you said, the fear needs to be put in some folks to realize what eternity in Hades would be like, or in paradise in heaven.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing up that 9/11, because I remember that day and how scared I was. You know, that was before I was a Christian, and I didn't even really consider anything about soul and eternity and all that. But I guarantee you, as a matter of fact, we did. There's a picture of it. Everyone at Cumberland University gathered around the pole. They canceled classes. They gathered around the pole, and we all just said a prayer, and everybody was religious that day. Everybody was religious that day. And I'm pretty sure that following Sunday, the pews were full. Absolutely. And like you said, and this is the case as well. You know, as time went by, it kind of dwindled down, right? And people have kind of forgotten about that. And I've made the comment that today, or starting next year, I believe that's going to make an impact on our future.
Brandon, I've noticed that with the enthusiasm and with the importance that has been expressed on it and the interest increased in Christianity, there has been more opposition to it.
Sure. Yep, especially in these days. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and that's true. Listen, the more we're enthusiastic about Christ, there's going to be more people, you know, fighting back, and that's supposed to happen.
But we weren't used to that in this country.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. But well, I would say that it's more open now. It's more open now. But our battles have been the same since the very beginning. But it's the fighting back has gotten stronger, I guess you could say, where it's more known. For sure. Okay, so, and then Hebrews 9:27 real quick.
And as he is appointed unto man once to die, but after this the judgment.
Yeah, even death right now, especially in our youth, we don't think about that, do we? We don't. If we are middle aged or younger, we are young. We feel good, and we have that mentality. I got several decades left in my life, and so there's that false sense of comfort too. But the only problem with that is that death is no respecter of persons. Death is no respecter of persons to the child in the womb, to the oldest person we could think of. It's coming to everybody, and we don't know when in each of our lives. And so because of that, we need to give an account to ourselves. We need to understand that the judgment is coming. Felix right here, he was terrified by this information. The only thing is it did not change him. It didn't change him at all. Instead, he delayed his obedience to some convenient time. And the problem with that is that time that they think would be right may not come. It may not come. So, all right. Now, Felix also, he was one of those who loved money and loved his lifestyle, because this is what he was, instead of obeying the gospel, this is what he said, verse 26, or what he felt. He hoped also that money should have been given him of Paul, that he might loose him. Wherefore he sent for him the oftener and communed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus came into Felix's room, and Felix, willing to show the Jews a pleasure, left Paul bound. So Paul remained in his cell for 2 more years. Before that, though, he thought he was going to get a bribe from old Paul. he wasn't really interested in the treasure that Paul was giving him. He's more interested in the materials that Paul probably had. He thought maybe Paul was rich because he came to Jerusalem. How? Why would they think Paul was rich when Paul came and finished his third missionary journey? Yes, he did. He came in with a lot of money to help support the poor Jewish Christians in Jerusalem. So maybe he thought Paul was this wealthy, well-off person and that he would bribe him into letting him go, but it didn't happen. So he kept him in 2 years. And now we've got a new governor, Acts 25. And this is Festus. We did have Felix, and now we have Festus here. And verse 1. Now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. He's the new governor of Palestine. He took over Felix. He's willing to go to Jerusalem to talk with their leaders. And I'm not sure that he knew the situation about Paul, but he's probably trying to develop this professional maybe a relationship. Maybe there's something that they could do for him and he could do for them, and they could help each other. I'm not sure what the whole the aim was there. But in verse 2 and 3, we get a little clarity. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him, and he would send for him to Jerusalem and lay wait in the way to kill him. So they tell him of Paul. You've got a prisoner, by the way, in Caesarea that we want back. And we need to try him because he has been a pest to us. That was his offense. Of course, there's nothing to try him over. He has done nothing wrong. He's going to actually talk. Paul's going to appeal this case to him and let him know that. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man if there be any wickedness of him. So there's a politeness here. I'm going to keep him here at Caesarea, but if you want to try him, come on down. We'll try him again. Okay, verse 6. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. Again, so here's this trial. You know, you think the Jews would say, you know what, we've already done this before. There's nothing we can do. But yet maybe perhaps there's a new governor there, and they're thinking, you know what, maybe we can convince this guy to let us take Paul back. But of course, it's not going to happen. So there's Jews there standing about before Paul in court, and again, they couldn't prove anything. We don't know what they said, but probably previously what Tertullus was saying back in 24. But here, verse 9, but Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things before me? All right, so here's weakness of a leader. He knows the law. He knows that he's innocent. He knows that Paul has done nothing wrong. They could prove his guilt and still ask a question like this. And what was his purpose? Why would he even ask Paul this question? Will you go back to Jerusalem so they'll just try? It says it right there in the first or second phrase of the first 9. But Festus willing to do what? Yeah, they're trying to do each other a favor here. They're trying to get on each other's good graces. Sometimes politicians will get together and say, you know what, I'll vote on your bill if you vote on mine. Or they'll compromise. There's a way to get their bill passed. They have to possibly vote for a bill they would normally reject or be against. Sometimes those things happen. So you have leaders here who are caving in for their own personal gain. So we don't have any reason here to believe that Festus knew about the assassination plot against Paul, but he's trying to appease the Jews. Verse 10, then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. You know this, and you still ask me a question like this. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, what did he say? Give it to me. Give me my punishment. If I deserve it, give it to me. I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. So, Paul again reminds Festus, I don't stand in your court. I don't stand in the Jewish court. I stand on what judgment seat in the world? Caesar's. I'm supposed to be tried by him. And so, and that's what he says. I violated no Jewish law. I didn't offend you or anything else. And then he courageously says, hey, if I'm worthy of death, kill me. Give it to me. All right, that is strength right there. That's courage. If I deserve this punishment, give it to me. Right? And so he makes that formal appeal by Caesar. And he had that right. Why? He was a Roman. Okay? Paul, again, his Roman citizenship saved his life.
Had a better chance in a Roman court for a fair trial as opposed to a court full of, Jews.
Right. I wish I could say he got a fair trial, but I don't think he did. Yeah. Big time. Verse 12. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, hey, how hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go. Since you've appealed to him, that's where you're going. And his statement may imply to Paul that he had not really improved his chances of acquittal. Because who's Caesar at this time? Does anybody know? It's okay if you don't. I had to study this tape. Nero. According to my notes, Nero. Nero is one of the most vile people who've ever lived. He was openly a homosexual. He killed his own sister and mother, and he was a big persecutor of the Lord's church. But according to my notes, Nero, you could be right. I don't know. I'm just going by my notes. But do what? Verse 25. What does it say? Released him unto. Oh wait, I'm on Luke 23. Yeah, appealed to Augustus. Okay, yep, there you go. Which I don't know if that's the same guy or not. I don't know. All right, verse 13. So Festus is going to talk with Agrippa here about Paul. He's kind of in a dilemma. He wants to appease the Jews and keep the peace there, really, and try to do a favor for them by releasing Paul or telling Paul or convincing Paul to go to their trial. He has no law, or there's no reason to even keep him there. He hasn't broken any laws, and so he needs advice here. He's with nothing really against him either. That's going to look bad on him as well. All right, verse 13. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came into Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's case unto the king, saying, there's a certain man left in bonds by Felix, the previous governor, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die. For that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. It's against the law to send Paul to them to have him killed without a fair trial, without his accusers coming to him, and then he be found guilty there. But, of course, that's not the case. Verse 17, therefore, when they were come hither, without any delay on the morrow, I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, He's talking about their own religion here. And of one Jesus, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. So, really, the governor in this, when he told him all these things, he admitted something here. He admitted any reference to the real aim, and that's to appease the Jews. He didn't want to tell him that's why I wanted to send him back. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. So Agrippa's intrigued. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come at Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. So now we have Agrippa's interest being kindled here, and wants to hear Paul. No doubt because of curiosity, and really not because he could, perhaps he could be the one that could give the final verdict. But the apostle situation developed in such a way that the Lord's promise was fulfilled, that Paul would bear Christ's name before kings, first of all, Acts 9 and 15. Although he could not circulate freely among the population preaching the gospel, but he was allowed to do what? He was allowed to teach while he was there. All right, there was really no strict rules, but he even announced that later, in the Philippian letter, that he was in Caesar's house and he could preach. But Paul, he knew this. He knew this was going to happen. The weakness of God is stronger than men. 1 Corinthians 1:25. All right, verse 24. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, you see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. I don't know what I'm going to say to Caesar when I send Paul over there. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had, I might have somewhat to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. So there's this big introductory speech here. This is the whole purpose of the trial. This is why we brought Paul here. So please help me out and tell me what I can do here. He has no clue, and that leads us to chapter 26. I love chapter 26. So much here that could be used for evangelism. So much here for examples. As far as those who are kind of like what Felix had done. I see what you're saying. I know what I need to do, but I need some time. I need some time and make sure I'll get things right in my life or whatnot. And that's okay. To take time is okay, but we have to make sure and be aware that time that we wish to have may not be there for us. But Agrippa, the biggest thing in this chapter, in my opinion, is that he said this: you almost persuaded me to be a Christian. You almost persuaded me to be a Christian. Of course, we have no record of that conversion, so I don't know if he was ever persuaded or not. But in this account, that's what he said. That's one of the most powerful, eye-opening statements in this chapter for sure. Anybody have any comments about today? We got through a whole chapter today. Can you believe that?
Hey, Brandon, clarification.
Yes, sir.
You're right, it is Nero. Augustus was a title that they...
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, I would get that confused. So, to me, before I even studied, I used to think Caesar was a name. But Caesar is actually a title as well. Okay? Right. But he was a vile man. That's what you need to know about it, for sure. Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Augustus, when somebody called you that was good. Don't call me Augustus, please. I don't like that name at all. But if there's nothing further, Lord willing, we'll continue at chapter 26. Thank you so much for your time.